Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. I hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate so many wonderful people who are working so hard in the trenches to make Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. Listen, with the anniversary of Katrina here, I came across a quote this morning as I looked through my digital history book, and the quote was from W.E.B. Du Bois. And he said this: "Now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. It is today that our best work can be done." What a beautiful thing to say. And that's certainly what we faced after Hurricane Katrina. Listen, Du Bois, if you don't know him, he was a pioneering African-American sociologist, historian, civil rights leader. He was an author. He was one of the most influential intellectuals of the 20th century. And he was the first African-American to graduate with a PhD from Harvard University in 1895. But he was right. It is today that our best work can be done. I was struck when I read that this morning, especially in light of the guest today. I want to read to you just a short sliver from my book, soon to be published, as most of my regular listeners know about. But here's a small section. Building a village means forging ties that hold when chaos strikes. I'm lucky to have seen so much good in so many people. One example is my friend Alberto Ibarguen, the former publisher of the Miami Herald and El Nuevo Herald, and the former CEO of the Knight Foundation. Our strong bond, built over years, proved its worth. The day after Katrina, Alberto and I connected via satellite phone as I stood in my front yard staring at the devastation. He listened carefully and encouraged me. He got to coastal Mississippi as fast as he could get here, hugged me and said, "Thank you for letting me come. I'm getting more from this visit than I'm giving." His wise counsel was a gift, but his actions inspired more. He funneled big financial support to relief agencies here that helped fund the Governor's Commission, ensuring aid reached those in need, and our volunteer leadership working with the Governor's Commission had resources for recovery, rebuilding, and renewal. He went on a mission to update major nonprofits across the country, sharing our needs. Later, he helped fund the John S. and James L. Knight Nonprofit Center in Gulfport, a haven for nonprofits in our community built after Katrina. In short, Alberto helped us find hope. Today, I'm honored to have someone who lives this mission of doing our best work now, not waiting for a better moment. And I'm thrilled to have my friend Alberto Ibarguen. Good morning, Alberto.
Good morning, Ricky. It's wonderful to hear your voice and to see you on my computer screen here. Great to be with you.
Isn't it amazing that it's been 20 years?
It's been incredible. And what's incredible in a way is I hear you read that. I'd forgotten that I wrote that to you. But yesterday when I found a picture of the two of us that I sent you, I wrote to you, and this is, I'm looking at it now. I said, when I finally reached on the phone, I was desperate to reach you, and I finally reached you on the satellite phone just a day or two after the storm. You said, "You have to see this to believe it." And so I took you at your word. I'm after all, we're journalists. We have to go to the place and take a look at it and figure out what to do. And I have been grateful to you ever since. And I mean that sincerely, because one of the three things I wanted to make sure to touch on today is how big a privilege it was to serve the people of Mississippi, to serve, oh my God, the people that I remember had such tenacity despite the storm with no complaint. They just started sweeping and started clearing this is before any program, before anybody had done anything. They were there. They were just simply getting on with life. And I remember at the airport on my way out, I drove in because you couldn't fly in at that when I got there. I rented a white Ford pickup in Mobile, and then drove over and slept in your parking lot at the newspaper, at the Biloxi Times Herald, and but when I left, it was a couple of days later. The airport had opened, and the woman who was taking the tickets on the way into the, this is when you still had tickets, went into the airport, went into the plane. I said, well, how are you feeling? And she said, I'm a tough old gal, but I ain't never seen nothing like this.
Yeah.
And despite that, there she was back at work, making the world work, making the world function. Amazing, amazing resilience in the people that I met and saw.
What struck me about you, of course, you and I, as I said, and as I've written, we had a long relationship. At one point, you even tried to get me to work for you in Miami.
I know.
And I hate to say this, but it turns out that it was a good thing I said no, because I was able to be here, and live out my career in a very positive way. And of course, being here and seeing all that I had worked so hard to build in terms of my own personal capacity to try to figure out, my role as a publisher in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. It was a gift to me in so many different ways. But you had just, you had retired from the Miami Herald and El Nuevo Herald as president and publisher after a great career in publishing, and had just joined the Knight Foundation. And then Katrina hits. And you find yourself here. You're still trying to get your sea legs under you as the new chairman of the board, or the new CEO of the organization. And suddenly you find yourself here in coastal Mississippi. But we were lucky to have you, that's for sure.
I was lucky to be in a position to respond. I really believe that. I had been on the job for maybe 4 weeks, 4.5 weeks. I was in Akron when the storm hit, which was another one of the Knight Foundation communities. And that afternoon, on the phone with a couple of people from our board, we transferred $1 million. I must have been one of the first grants that went in to the relief, half to the Salvation Army and half to the Red Cross, as ante is the way I thought about it. So we're in the game. We were in the game anyhow because you were there, and Biloxi was one of our communities. But the two things is, when you invited me to come and reflect, that beside the service, the privilege to serve, the other two things I really wanted to highlight were the role of the newspaper and how leadership matters. Leadership matters. You knew what to say to me to get me over there. I got there. I think I got there Friday or Saturday, and I think the storm was Monday, Tuesday. And it was as fast, literally as fast as I could get transportation to get me over there. I think nothing I did would have prepared me for it, and nothing I did better prepared me for responding. I don't think that had I just sat in my office and read the reports or heard on TV or even looked at pictures, would have been nearly as important as what I actually witnessed. When, for example, I remember Stan Tyner, your editor at the newspaper, one morning coming in, and believe me, this was early in the morning. I'm not an early morning guy. I'm much more of a late night guy, as you know. But I got up early that morning, and in comes Stan Tyner. I was seeing a line of people walking over to the newspaper to get the newspaper, because you were printing it in Alabama, and they were trucking it in to bring the newspaper in, because they wanted the information. They needed the information. They needed to know that we're still part of a community. That was an essential part of the recovery. And Stan walked in, it was in the parking lot, and he showed me a sheaf of paper, just a whole bunch of different papers. And he said, every one of these is a story. My job is to figure out how to knit them together and tell a cohesive story that tells people what happened, tells people what's going on, and gives people hope. It was an amazing summary of what community journalism is supposed to be, and the people of that newspaper deserved every bit of the Pulitzer Prize that you won as a result of it. But to me, the incredible part was the people walking over to the newspaper to get that information. You didn't want to waste gas. You didn't have electricity, so there was no radio or TV. You didn't want to waste gas driving over to get the paper, so people walked over. It was an amazing sight. I think one of the Richard Haas, the chairman, the president, the former president of the Council on Foreign Relations, wrote a book not too long ago on foreign policy, and he said he thought the biggest foreign policy crisis, the biggest foreign policy threat to the United States was the division that we had within our communities. The division.
Hey, let's do this, Alberto. We're at the end of this segment. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're visiting with Alberto Ibarguen, the former CEO of the Knight Foundation. And as I have written, he was a member of My Village, this group of extended family and friends and associates that came here and ultimately became extraordinarily important to the recovery effort here in coastal Mississippi. But when we went to break, you were mentioning this book. So why don't you pick it up from there, Alberto?
Yeah, there was a book by Richard Haas, who was the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, and he had been a former, I think his title was head of strategy in the State Department under George Bush, the son, and George W. And so a man of great experience. He wrote a book, and he identified as the biggest threat to the United States and biggest international threat to the United States were the divisions within the United States. The divisions within the United States. And I know that to a hammer, everything is a nail. And so to me, everything is about media and informing community and the local paper and so forth. But today, communities throughout the United States, particularly in the South, by the way, are without a reliable local news source that helps create a sense of community, that helps create trust, and it helps create trust because the stories can be verified by the citizens themselves. You tell me, you write me a story about Tajikistan or Uzbekistan, and I guess I'll take your word for it. But frankly, I can't check that. But you write to me a story about the building they're building down the street, or the potholes, or the traffic jams, or what's going on at the school board. That's something I, as a citizen, can easily check. And that trust that is built when you have reliable news time after time, day after day, is absolutely invaluable at a moment like Katrina, when people had to come together. And where did they go? They walked over to the Biloxi Times-Herald to get their copy of your newspaper, and that's where community began to really come together.
It'd be later.
Yeah, the Sun Herald, incidentally, just a slip. But here,
Sun Herald.
Yeah, that's okay. So what's amazing to me when I reflect about the digital tsunami that we both had the opportunity to work within to try to find answers. If you reflect on Katrina, the iPhone wasn't introduced by Steve Jobs until 2 years after Hurricane Katrina. Just put that in perspective for a minute, and think about the change that has occurred as a result of everyone now being a reporter with their smartphones. An amazing turn of events for local news, and we could do an entire story about that, or an entire show about that. Yeah.
I was trying to reach you from day one after the hurricane, and that was the hurricane Monday to Tuesday?
Monday.
I don't think I reached.
Yeah.
It was a Monday morning. So I don't think I
Yeah.
reached you until maybe Wednesday, I think it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Today, that would be a lifetime.
Yeah. I know. It would
And
be.
back then, I felt lucky that I reached you that soon. It was
Yeah. I
also a
remember.
great
Yeah.
lesson.
Yeah.
Sorry, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Yeah. No, you go ahead. Yeah.
I say it was also a great lesson. That whole experience was a great lesson in leadership, with the way that you jumped in and Stan jumped in. But the great chief in that story was, of course, Haley Barbour. And I remember I didn't meet him on that first visit, but I saw that you could go in 75 different directions. And I remember telling you at the end of my visit, 2 or 3 days there, when I was tired of sleeping in your parking lot, and I had to go back home to Miami, and I thought if anybody is going to try to pull all of this stuff together and draw up a cohesive plan, I'm in. Knight Foundation is in. You told that to Haley Barbour. A couple of days later, I was up in New York, and I had gone to see, at her request, the president of Ford Foundation. She called me up and she said, "There's rumor going around that you went to the site of the disaster." And I said, "Well, of course I did." And she said, "Well, Alberto," he said, "you're now president of a foundation. You're not a journalist anymore. Presidents of foundations sit back in the office and read the report." And I said, "That's not me." I said, I'm from a journalistic culture. You go out there, you cover the triple axe murder or the hurricane or whatever it is. The next day, somebody writes an editorial about what we ought to do, and the third day, you're off to the next triple axe murder, and go on to the next story, because life goes on. She laughed, had me come in. I did. She offered to help out, and on my way literally from Ford Foundation to LaGuardia Airport to come back to Miami, my phone rings. And I remember I'd been president of Knight Foundation for a matter of weeks, just weeks. And it's Haley Barbour. It's the governor of the state. And I will not try to do his accent. I just cannot. But he said, "No, Alberto," he's Haley Barbour. I said that. So he said, I'm gonna put together this commission, and I want to do it with private money, because otherwise we're going to get all kinds of politics in here. And I've hired a fellow from down your way, Andres Duany." And I said, "Ah, you mean Andres Duany?" And he said, "Yeah, whatever." It is, "Yes, that's the one." And he said, "And I've got Jim Barber, Jim
Barksdale.
who's going
Yeah.
Barksdale, who's gonna chair it." And I knew Jim. I had been chairman of PBS, and Jim was a great supporter of PBS in Mississippi, educational television in Mississippi. And I said, "Fantastic." I said, "Governor, you get Barksdale and you get Duany, and I'll pay for it." And he said, "Well, now, son," he said, "this isn't going to be just a matter of dollar here, dollar. This is going to be some real money." And I had this out of body experience of the shortest term of anybody ever as president of Knight Foundation, committing to the governor of Mississippi what he did not have, and had no authority to commit. And so I said, "Well, Governor, you get Barksdale and you get Duany, and if I can't pay for it, I'll find out who can," because I figured Ford was probably good for it. But we never needed them, because Barksdale put in $1 million, we put in another $1 million, and within 2 or 3 weeks, we were all there at the Isle of Capri, or what remained of the Isle of Capri hotel, and it was hundreds of architects, engineers, city planners, and plain old citizens. And then there was that whole couple of months of charrettes where people were able, in 11 communities, to say, "This makes sense in my community. This plan does not. We improve the plan. You improve the plans. I didn't do it. You improve." And in December, while without any disrespect intended, while New Orleans was still arguing about who should be on the committee, Mississippi had already developed a blueprint for the development. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't followed to a T, but it was a roadmap and a sign of hope. It was absolutely brilliant leadership on the part of all you folks. To this day, it's been one of the great experiences of my life.
Well, I can't tell you how much we appreciate that leadership. Along the way, you actually sent me to Princeton to visit, have a day with. They literally a focus on Mississippi with the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation. I think if I'm saying that correctly,
Robert Wood Johnson,
and they had a community space for people to be able to come there and meet. It was an amazing thing that I saw. But it was, several of us had these inspirations that ultimately led to the Knight Foundation, the Knight Nonprofit Center here in coastal Mississippi, which you guys subsequently helped us fund in a very big way. That's why it's called the Knight Foundation today. That's a story in and of it. The Knight Nonprofit Center today. That's a story in and of itself. But we're coming to the end of our time together, Alberto. I'll give you an opportunity to kind of have last words here, but I wish we had more time together.
I always wish we had more time together. I will tell you, leadership matters. Informing community is the train crash that is about to split our nation apart. We have got to work to do something about that. I don't want to just simply wave the flag and say we should hold hands and sing Kumbaya. That never was me. But I do believe in informing communities so then we can have our different opinions. But first we start with the facts, and we start with a neutral report that isn't trying to convince you of one side or the other. And finally, Ricky, you gave me one of the greatest opportunities to serve of my life, and I meant it sincerely. I have been grateful to you and to Haley Barbour ever since.
Well, thank you, my friend. I mean, for everyone who understands the aftermath and the role that the Knight Foundation played in our aftermath and continues to play in our community, they owe a great gratitude to you. That is for sure. You're my friend, someone I love dearly, and I appreciate what you're doing. And it's good to see you doing well in retirement, my friend.
Great to see you. Say hi to Ann and to Justin and all your family. I hope all of you are blessed and keep on thriving.
You bet. You bet. Great conversation, my friend Alberto Ibarguen. Joe Spraggins when we come back. We'll see you after this.